Good morning and happy Monday and happy month end. This is Ian Nethercott, the host of the famous Auto Hub show, celebrating our fifth season. We're going to start this morning, being that it's month end, with an actual edit of a video that I shot with Katie Maris. If you don't know Katie Maris, you should definitely take a look at it. And take a look at what she does. She's a specialist in customer experience from the female perspective. And we all know women probably influence about 80% of car decisions. But without further ado, here we go. That's weird. From other places in terms of new car companies. Is that there has been a focus from the OEM down on improving it. The challenge is the resistance to change. So when I look at digital retail to pick a random part of the car business, or online buying to pick Amazon as a company, and to pick gender diversity, because this is true not just in sales, but in the service side of the business as well. The thing that really, I think, is the biggest impediment, not just the resistance from the car dealer, is the makeup of the people working in retail. When I worked in retail, generally the only women working in the dealerships I worked in, and not to say this is right or wrong, were either at reception, in finance, or in accounting. Those tended to be the three areas. A little bit in service, usually in the parts department sometimes, or sometimes in the service lane. That's why we started to do HR shows on retention and attraction of female employees, because the numbers were so bad. Now, what we've learned from 5 years and close to 400 episodes on various topics in auto around making the industry better is that no one really cares, it seems, about human resources, but more importantly, diversity in staffing. But they all seem to be focused on customer experience, but a lot of it's talk. What do you feel is the straw that will break the camel's back where they actually start doing things? Like, I've heard a lot of talk about this, don't get me wrong. I've done a lot of talking about it, but what do you think is actually the pivot point where that actually starts to change drastically?
Yeah, so I believe we're in what we call the experience competition era. So when a customer walks through the door, I'm just going to talk about consumer experience for a minute before I pivot over to the internal customer.
Yeah.
When a customer walks through the door, they've already sold themselves. And we haven't caught up to that understanding yet. It's no longer, yes, marketing matters. Of course, your inventory spread matters, systems and processes. Of course, all of that makes the dealership tick, both on variable and the offside, or the fixed and variable side. But the customer has already done the research. Because of online and digital retailing, they already know what they want. They know the make, the model. They know even probably the lease and finance rate. They've already decided every single thing, the trim level, the rate, as I mentioned, that they are going to be okay with. They've already decided that. So when they touch their hand on that door handle and they open up that dealership door, the only thing left to do is to create an experience. So 88% of customers today say that the experience matters more now than ever. So that's a huge step. 79% of customers say they will leave a current brand for the competition based off of a better experience being provided by the competition. So if we don't get our heads out of where, we are going to continuously lose the consumer to somebody that gets it. So when you ask the question, what's going to, the straw that breaks the camel's back, it's going to be the loss of consumers and the loss of retention of your consumers, the loss of loyalty. You're going to see sales drastically go down, and some are going to completely excel, and others are going to completely tank. We're going to see polar opposites, I believe, until everyone starts to realize that the experience matters and we start to level it a little bit. So I think that it's going to be that. Now, on the flip side, when you talk about female employees, the internal consumer, when you have more women, you make more money, period. Women are, number one, they're the most influential consumer. Women want to do business where they see themselves in. So that when you have more women, you bring more women. Period. More women, more women employees, female employees, more female consumers. When you have more women, you have more efficiency, you have more retention. There was this stat, and it's insane, but 20% of employees will stay based off of the fact that their leader is a woman because they're more communicative, they're more compassionate, they create more collaboration, they just create a better work environment.
So that's a little bit of the interview with Katie Maris. If you're not familiar with Katie, check out the total interview on the AutoHub Show page with our new one-on-one interview series. And stay tuned for a new interview with the CEO of Fuse Auto Tech, which I should have up this week. Here we go.
Tony, I'm the general manager of Fred Beans Kia in Langhorne. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman, Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now, and anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry's been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians, even through the toughest times in the industry. And he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out a textbook, but Larry has a real world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome. So let me move this over. Here we go. And we are waiting for Tim. He should be here shortly. I know his partner in crime is there, and we have Doug, and then Larry should be here shortly as well. So while we're waiting, why don't we start with Mr. Doug Reeves, since he's on. I haven't seen Mr. Doug Reeves in a long time, and Tim I think is on as well, but he's just he's en route. I talked to his technician this morning from his new studio. So, Doug, what's going on in the wild, wild world of A to Z or A to Z sync?
More of the same, really, ramping up our latest venture.
Oh, okay, good.
And,
congrats.
And, observing this industry as it recovers from CDK and as it continues to struggle with, EVs and inventory and all of the above.
Yeah, you may want to check out the interview I did. I'm going to have it up this week with the former fighter pilot head of Fuse Autotech. It was kind of interesting what he had to say about sort of what their software was doing during the CDK outage. That was kind of interesting. I'm not sure, what the competitive nature is there with you guys, but it was kind of interesting.
I can tell you on our end, our dealers were still able to fully transact deals during the CDK outage. They were able to desk them. They were able to submit them to the banks. They were able to run F&I menus, sign documents. And unless their CRM was e-leads, we were able to push it into e-leads. The only hiccup we had was operating on the inventory as of the day of the fail. But other than that, our dealers kept doing business as usual. So it wasn't really a major hiccup. They just had to, implement it all into the CRM once it came back up functioning.
So what has your feedback been from them afterwards? And have you had other dealers reaching out to you saying, hey, I kind of want sort of a secondary backup system just in case I have a problem with CDK or other? I know there's other CRMs that have had challenges, in the past. What have you heard there? I mean, that's something he was talking about where it's like, well, dealers are now saying, yeah, I want, a backup scenario. I don't want to put all my eggs in the CRM basket.
That's certainly the case. We certainly had a lot of interest that was generated for people looking to not be dependent on one sole provider for everything.
Right.
There was definitely some interest there, and but other than that, there wasn't a lot of feedback. Most, our clients are all back up, and I think they've gotten pretty much all their data pushed into their DMS, and they're fine now. So there was definitely some panic. Some panic phone calls were made right away. That's certainly the case.
So how did that work on the fixed op side? Do you guys have anything on the fixed op side you're doing at all?
No, we don't worry. We don't do anything with fixed ops.
Because that was the other question I had from people before, where I was like, okay, so my sales side of the house isn't working right now, or I'm using pen and paper or whatever. But what's going on when I have to deal with this stuff on the fixed op side? So that maybe that's a topic for a show for a backup scenario. But it was kind of interesting just because that sort of came up in the conversation. But more importantly, as you see sort of the, I guess, evolution was more of what I was talking about with him on the digital retail front. Are you seeing sort of dealers being a lot more open-minded to that than they were, say, 2-3 years ago? I know there was a lot of interest 2-3 years ago, but are you seeing dealers now saying, okay, now you got me, I've got to lean in and listen to this?
Yeah, I think in general, I think there's a lot of factors that are driving conversations now. I think dealers are a little bit more cognizant of their expenses, and they're looking for ways that they can lower their tech stack expenses. And certainly by eliminating some tools and minimizing the number of touch points that a sales team has to make with platforms to do a deal is certainly interesting. I think there's also a concern, and we certainly hear it a lot on our end, of they need a consistent sales process. They still have people kind of running around like the Wild Wild West, doing it their way, and looking for a platform that'll drive consistency. And we're certainly providing that as well. And I just think in general, I think there's going to be a much more of an awareness of the possibility of purchasing a vehicle entirely while sitting on your couch and simply having to go in and take delivery at a store. That is becoming a reality now. And I think more and more dealers, as that becomes more prevalent, more and more dealers will lean into that and say, I want that.
Yeah,
and I think that ties well with what the OEM ultimately would love to have as well. Just make it easier for their customers to purchase a vehicle and go to the dealership and have a great experience just getting it delivered.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the stat, and this is just not a new stat, but it's a stat that came out in multiple reports last year, and I think even as we went into this year, was it's really about sort of that attention span or time someone spends. And the thing that was interesting with the interview I did was that there was obviously an interest in the industry, not being from the industry, from the gentleman who's the CEO of Hughes. But the other thing that was interesting was he was just fascinated by the complexity of the problem or the complexity of the challenge. And I think that's what really is kind of interesting as you look at it. It's been, 25 years since the internet showed up, I guess. We're seeing AI tools and other tools now starting to get involved in everything, including, I think I saw an interview on the weekend with Musk talking to Jordan Peterson about his take on AI, which was kind of interesting. But, when you look at it, the simple problem is, why is this taking so long? And, part of it, I think, is just, to your point, you're dealing with sort of the wild west nature of some dealerships or dealer groups or individual dealers versus dealers that are saying, hey, it's about customer experience. And the video that we played, or part of the video we played at the beginning, was really a focus on customer experience, but more importantly, that people will lead brands and dealerships based on that alone. It's not just time anymore. Time is just one of the factors. And I think
that's certainly the case.
Yeah, I think that's a new twist for dealers who say, hey, the internet was fine. I'm doing that now. I got a CRM. I'm doing that now. I'm not using pieces of paper as much anymore. I'm making it easy for the customer. I'm listening to the OEM, and CSI is something I got dialed in, but how do I take it to the next level? So I guess my question for you is, when I'm making that decision to say, I don't know, streamline the whole process, make it that one-person process, or make it that customer-centric process, or even just speeding up that process for a customer. What's the, I guess, what are the cautionary stuff that you would, set expectations for that dealer who says, hey, it used to take 5 hours, and you're saying it can take an hour, for example, to pick two random numbers. What do you think?
You've opened up a lot of things. So let's take them one at a time.
Yeah.
I think in general, dealers need to focus on the dealership experience, not the customer experience. And I know we've talked about this in the past. They focus on the customer at the peril of the salesperson or the sales staff. And I think they really need to start there and try to figure out what it is that's hindering their ability to provide a better experience. It could simply be their process. It could be the multitude of platforms that they have to fight through and the poor integrations and the poor providers that they have. It could simply be that they just don't pay enough attention to it. So I think they have to look internally first before they start focusing on the customer experience, because if it's not good for the employees, it doesn't matter. When you start talking about one person, that's such a titanic shift that is definitely not for every dealer. That is such a cultural change that you have to have full buy-in from everybody in the dealership that they're going to go to this method. You have to eliminate all obstacles that would make that an unlikely occurrence. Oftentimes, that's the elimination of the old tools that they relied upon. If there's a new tool that's going to power the one-person model, they have to convince their sales management staff that empowering their salespeople to do more is the right way to go. And they have to have a culture of coaching. And if they're not willing to coach people up individually and do it on a regular basis, it'll be an active, it just won't work. But if they've acknowledged all of those things and they have addressed them accordingly, the one-person model is the best way to go. Period. End of story. There is no. I don't think there's any way to argue that. I mean, every KPI shows it, and customer feedback shows it as well. And the third thing I'll say is, and you said this, it has been proven time and time again with our clients that they don't have to be the lowest priced dealer to dominate a market, but they traditionally have the best experience, and customers like shopping there. And that trumps price oftentimes. There's always going to be people that are going to just want to grind somebody down for the last penny. Fine, that's great. If that's not your way of running a business, then don't worry about it. But the vast majority of people will pay more for a better experience. I mean, if you take your wife out for your anniversary, you're not going to Chili's. You're probably going to go to a nice restaurant. Foods, both times you're going to go home feeling good. The meal was fine, but you're paying for the experience. Same thing should be in the car industry. I find it interesting that, during COVID and post-COVID, every other industry was able to figure out a better way to offer an experience to customers, but the car industry remained stubbornly stuck to their own old ways. But I think you're starting to see that change. And I think there's a large initiative that's being undertaken right now that's really going to open up the eyes to a lot of people that there is a better way, and it's being developed.
And what's your opinion? I mean, obviously A to Z or A to Z, you're in the car industry. Are you guys looking at moving to other industries as you work through the changes? No? That's not something you're interested in?
We love the car industry. We love the car industry, and there's plenty of work to be done in the car industry, as you know.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at fear of change, and I've done some shows recently around change, because clearly that's a big challenge, not only with change in general, but the rate of change these days. Do you feel that that's pushing people to finally go, hey, I got to embrace change because it's getting worse, not better, in terms of the speed of it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think that as they see others become more successful who have adopted change, obviously the copycats will come. It's just a matter of large numbers. When there's more and more that are doing it, when there's more and more that are seeing success with it, then more and more will follow suit. Nobody, the vast majority are kind of in the middle of the bell curve. They're not early adopters. They're not laggard adopters. They're just waiting for the right cue for them personally to say, okay, let's do this.
And is there any move towards taking A to Z international in terms of looking at it, say, in Europe or other countries?
I'm sure that will happen at some point. Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't own the company, but I would think so at some point. Yeah, we would certainly work our ways to other parts of the world. But again, there's plenty of work to be done simply within the United States.
And I'm not sure if Tim is in name only there or whether he's joined. So, Tim, are you there? I don't think he's there yet. Anyway, I'm sure he'll join. I'm sure he'll join in as he goes. So, you
brought up a statement earlier that I wanted to follow up on. I think a lot of the digital retailing tools. Well, let's step back. When DR first came out, it was kind of mass adopted because hell, we can't sell people face to face because of COVID.
Right.
And so people ran to it. And companies developed all these platforms. But I think what we saw and what we've continued to see, and there's Tim,
Yep.
is that a lot of these platforms, while they perform a multitude of technological functions, from a user standpoint, they're just not easy. There's too much work, and the frustration that results often leads to customers saying, "This is, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here.
Right.
I'm not going to pursue going further." And I think that we've seen other platforms that have in other industries that have managed to make it very simple to purchase anything. And I think that the auto industry needs to follow suit, and they need to get rid of the hurdles, and it should be 9-10 clicks and I'm done. I shouldn't
Right.
have to spend a lot of time to do this stuff. And I find that an interesting statement on our industry, that we just seem to be so slow to make things easy.
Well, yeah.
Tim, what are your thoughts? I mean, Tim, I was just saying that, a lot of the digital retailing experience that exists currently in the auto industry is basically so much work that it's not worth it. It's just too much work for the customer. There's just too many hurdles. There's too many gates. You're forcing me to do things I don't want to do. And
Right.
It shouldn't be that way.
Right. No, I mean, I think, my wife who works for Ford, we just bought a Ford Ranger XLT, a good city truck, we like to call it.
There you go.
And the dealer, just all the steps that they make us go through to do, we've had to bring it in for repair already once. We've had it got 1,500 miles on it, and there's a whole other story about quality that we could talk about there. But just the steps they make us go through to schedule an appointment. And this is I've said on this show a number of times, but going all the way back to 2017, it was Brian Benstock who told me that this, when he preaches about the frictionless experience, and he says we have to stop asking customers if they can work on our terms, and we need to ask customers what their terms are, and be able to operate in that ecosystem. So I'm sorry I run late today, guys.
Yeah, that's
but
okay.
This is to the point about the industry. I think NADA is wanting to make a step in the right direction by working with Authenticom to give dealers a way to take data that's in the DMS and do something else with it. It's that what else do they do with it that is the determining factor, right? Are you gonna use tools like A to Z? Are you going to use customer data platforms? Are Chris McTague and Prasad Chivali with Axle Automotive, who have started to look at this notion of pulling all the data from the dealer into one platform. You would think with the aftermath of CDK that the industry would be ripe to really consider cybersecurity, absolutely, but also this is my data and how do I control it, and better yet, how am I doing it to not just sell more vehicles, but to have happier customers who buy second and third vehicles from me, or at least come to get their oil changed from me, or at least come back and buy aftermarket parts and service, and at the parts counter.
Yep.
If they're not asking about those kinds of questions, and how the systems that they spend a lot of money on, how are they using that information to drive and lift the performance of each part of the dealership? And if they do that with the customer in mind and focused on the customer experience, they learn a whole lot. They learn a whole lot of things they don't know already, but they find that it requires nominal more investment but it puts them in a position of readiness for whatever happens should something happen like a CrowdStrike / Microsoft or CDK situation happens again, just as an example only, just
Yeah.
talking about that as example only.
Yeah, I mean, we had a discussion earlier about a backup system. I had a discussion with CEO of Fuse Autotech about this, and he was talking about that, and so was Doug. But you bring up an interesting point on the service side. I saw a post, I think it was on the weekend, where they talked about the accelerating decline of service retention. And I sat there and I was like, okay, well, I remember working with General Motors dealers almost 15 years ago. And at that point, they were like, oh yeah, we want to have 40% retention of our sales customers to service. And I was looking at these numbers that are pretty recent, I believe. And they were saying that some dealers now are at 30%. And I was sitting there going, like, that's scary. But more importantly, to your point on the data side, they're not only losing service revenue from that based on the fact that we're making them jump through hoops to book a service appointment, to pick a random idea there, but also they're not retaining the people because they're making it difficult. Like everyone else is saying, it's easy, show up whenever you want, we'll fix your car. And they're like, well, no, you got to book it, and then you got to schedule it, and then you got to do this. And it's ripe for disruption, obviously, but more importantly, that is going to denote changes in the sales side of the house eventually, because as you lose more and more customers on service, your repeat business declines because they figure out other places to buy stuff, right? And I was talking to Doug earlier about, could you fix other industries? But I think when you look at the sales side of the house, the service side of the house is the next area where you got to go, okay, there's been a couple companies trying to fix this, but why can't it be just as easy as you're making it eventually on the sales side, on the service side? Why does that have to be so difficult? And I know there's some companies who've tried, but I think there's a huge opportunity there to say, okay, let's make it easy. It can't be that hard to service your car. Like, really can't. I wouldn't think, right?
Well, I mean, that's real quick. That's to be more prescriptive. We had the truck in service last week, and my wife, she's like, I haven't heard from the tech once. I haven't heard from the guys at the desk either, right? And she goes, I have to text them for them to call me. I have to ask them what's going on, So that's not even a technological challenge right there. That's just, how do you communicate with a customer? In that situation, here's a $40,000 truck that just rolled off the lot a month ago, and it's been sitting here for a couple of days. How can we escalate, or how can we just make sure that we are seamlessly and directly communicating with the customer what's going on, so they know and they're not having to wait guessing. And I guess that goes for all vehicles, though. I mean, it's just, let's understand how people use vehicles. They use them to get to work. They use them to get to shop, to pick up their kids and drop off their kids places, to get to the hospital. I mean, to get to dialysis. I mean, I'm just thinking about, you can go down and think about mobility is at the center of it all. And if a dealer doesn't start to have empathy with how a customer needs to know immediately, and needs to know with as much detail as possible what's going on with that they depend on to do all those things, then there's a big problem in the industry. There's at least a big problem with a majority of dealers, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the call volume, telephone calls, be it text messages. I know text messages, they tried to sort of fix that with texting, which has got limited results. But, the number one challenge in call volume in a car dealer is it done yet? And it's kind of the same scenario as we were talking about in terms of, are we done buying a car yet? It's like, how long is this going to take? But more importantly, I'll use the example from another retail, that I sometimes go to when I'm getting stuff fixed, at least they have a general sense and they're saying, okay, here's when it should be done, or here's when it could be done, versus, oh, we don't know, we'll let you know.
Right.
We're not sure. We fix them for 11, but who knows? We'll call you. So, I mean, it's kind of like going to the hospital for an operation, going, when are we going to be done? I don't know. Sometime in the future. So that I think is part of the issue, but more important, it's a huge opportunity. I had the opportunity to work with a large Toyota dealer in Oregon, and their big commitment was on oil changes, to pick a random thing. But it was like, okay, less than 30 minutes or you don't pay for it. And I'm thinking about it going, if it's even a major repair on a car, they should have a pretty good idea based on ROs and data from the manufacturer, how long it's going to take, and at least set that expectation, right? At least say, hey, Tim, yeah, we appreciate your business. We're sorry there's a problem with the truck. It's going to be a maximum of this much. And obviously over anticipate, so it gets done faster, but give you a kind of a thought versus, yeah, you just call me, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing to me that it takes that long. I mean, it was funny. I had what I thought were some stone chips in the Jeep that I bought. So I took it, I booked it in, took it in, and he called me and go, oh, we couldn't fix those. Well, wouldn't you have looked at those before you took it in to fix them?
Yeah.
Obviously not. It was crazy to me, but I think part of it is just setting that expectation. And I think the same is true on the sales side of the house. The technology is great, but if Doug's company was saying, hey, we know a car purchase used to take X, our goal is to make it the best possible experience, and it's going to take a maximum of this amount of time, right? To set that expectation for the customer and say, not only are we trying to reduce your time frame, we're trying to make it easier for you, but here's the expectation we're setting, right? And I think if they did that.
Actually, we have a client that does just that. They have trademarked one price, one person, 1 hour. And from the time that you agree to the figures, it's an hour.
Yep.
And you're out. And, unless there's something really drastic that needs to be done, they pretty much live up to it. And people know that, and that's why they dominate the market. Because people know what to expect and they deliver on that expectation.
Oh, 100%. So that's really been a game changer for them. And in that market, for sure. And Tim, what could they have done better at the Ford store, in your opinion? I mean, you know what you're talking about. I mean, how do you think they could have handled it better?
Well, I mean, it's a long list, but
could have built a better truck in the first place.
Yeah. Well, no, it's a fantastic truck. It really is. And I know because I've because it's in the family, I'm intimately familiar with supply chain issues and quality from the factory. I know what's going on. I would say, it just, we have to be honest. It was in the middle of the CDK, moment. It was in the middle of that. So a lot of what they, I was pleased that they didn't use that as a crutch. They didn't say, hey, really sorry, our CRM is broken, or, because the average person buying a car doesn't know what a DMS is. They could have called it something else.
Yeah.
But, it's what we've talked about a few times, Doug, and we've talked about it on this show. We had the car for a month, and all we heard was, because of CDK, all we heard was from the F&I director who needed some information from us to finally do TTNL, right?
Yeah.
To finally be able to register the vehicle. The person who sold us the vehicle, the person who went on the test drive with us, who brokered everything with the deal desk and the F&I office, he had left early before we actually signed the papers, because he had a children's birthday. One of his kiddos had a birthday that night. Totally got that.
Yeah.
But guess what? I would have expected a call or an email a week later. I would have expected hey, how are things going? Just checking in, or calling us up, at least within the first month. Call us up and ask us how things are going. It's that simple. I've spoken at 3 or 4 20 groups so far this year on data management, and in the last month, cyber insurance and cybersecurity, but data management and this notion of customer data platforms, master
Right.
data management, and other systems that are in the marketplace that are intended to improve the customer experience. And had a number of people I've talked to bring up the Sewell example, right?
Yeah.
Just to bring up the example of how do you look at the peripheral of the customer experience? It doesn't always have to be about the vehicle. How do you invest in knowing, what sports their kids play, and not picking up their dry cleaning for them, because not everybody uses dry cleaning the way they used to, but just show some effort, I think, is the
I think
short
it's just
answer to what you're asking me, Ian.
Yeah, common courtesy. I mean, what would you expect? What's interesting is that you've got these dealers that are ultra wealthy to a large degree, who have their own set of expectations, how they expect to be treated, but they won't extend the same courtesy to their clients that have made them ultra wealthy. Just doesn't make sense.
Well, it's just basic process, though. I mean, even if you're using technology, and I'm not against using technology in different ways to do that, but if you're selling a product, whether it be a toaster or whether it be a car or whether it be a house, and actually I bought a house here about a year ago, and the realtor probably did more as an annual gift, even though it wasn't anything crazy, than any car purchase I've ever made.
Sure.
And granted, it's a larger purchase, but the principle's the same. I mean, for most people, it's one of the largest purchases in their life. But to call a month after you bought it and say, "How is it?" Is not really a lot to ask. I don't think. I mean, something as simple as a thank you card probably would have been great. But the thing that amazes me in 2024 is, with all the ways to reach out to someone. Text messages, video, mail, phone calls. There just seems to be less of that happening, and I'm not quite sure why. I mean, it's I guess one of the reasons I used to send postcards back in the day. But if you call people or text them, whatever the age demographic idea is, or at least you care about it. At least you're actually putting effort in.
There's nothing as powerful as a handwritten note.
Oh, I agree.
I will go to my grave thinking that. I mean, that shows you care.
Yeah, because how often do you get one day?
Exactly.
Not often.
I mean, it's amazing how rare it is, and in the massive amount of mail that you get that's junk, there's a handwritten note there that stands out. It stands out.
Yeah. I mean, I get excited, and it happens about once a month. Somebody sends me a handwritten thank you note, and about every other one of them, they also stick like a $10, $25 Starbucks card in there, right? And I yawn sometimes and say, "Oh, and not another Starbucks card." But but at the end of the day, the effort and the value that's in that, right? Is hey, thank you for your time, or thank you for the opportunity, whatever the thank you was for. And then, hey, let me give you an artifact here that when you go buy your next cup of coffee, you'll think of me, right? I mean,
exactly.
It is the tiniest little things, to your point, Doug, about a handwritten note. It is the tiniest little things we have to improve. And this is for any business. This is not just for the car business. I mean, this is the majority of commerce, and if we want to call it industry, has moved to highly transactional models that are all about the conversion of you as a customer and you as a sale, right? I mean, and there are those brands that I think give more of a shit than those that are evidently and they stand out, right? Just like a handwritten note. You know, I'll end on it on just a case study, but it's Nordstrom. You know, anytime I buy dress shirts from Nordstrom, and when I do, sometimes I travel somewhere and I spill coffee on my shirt and I got to go buy a new one. As an example, Human Folly. I walk in wearing the coffee stained shirt. The Nordstrom folks are like, "Oh no, sorry about that.
Yeah.
What's your phone number?" And they ask me my phone number. As soon as I tell them my phone number, they're like, "Hey, looks like we have a couple in your size. And you know, and do you want something the same color?" You know, they immediately go after that. They don't try to waste my time. They just try to get right after it, right? But they there's a classic example of technology, not sophisticated technology either. I mean, not at all. But a process, right? And almost a cultural management style in terms of what do you do to make sure that you're as quickly, succinctly, and relevantly meeting the customer's needs. I mean, that's all that's happening in that situation.
When technology can merge with humanization, you've got the winner. That's really what you're saying. Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
we solved that one.
I used the example earlier when I before the call I was talking to Tim's Super Tech. I had destroyed my my main computer at home with a cup of coffee a couple weeks ago. Accidentally obliterated it, and I went in perfectly thinking that I was going to be buying a new computer. It was dust. And the company that I bought it from, they basically like, yeah, we can fix it under warranty and it's only going to cost this much money. And I was like, I was shocked. Like I was shocked in a good way. But more importantly, they set that expectation. They said, we're confident we can do it. It's going to cost a maximum of this. If someone did that at a car dealer or even in, for example, like a service department or parts department or something, or a retailer and said, hey, like we appreciate the problem. We're going to fix it. We're going to do this for you. Right. That would be a huge thing, but and there's a great book about Nordstrom's. I think it's called The Nordstrom Way, where they actually empower employees to do this. And I think that that's part of it, but also it's the culture we talked about, Sewell. It's the culture of, we should care about the customer because they're the one that drives the revenue, right? Whether it's on a piece of paper or a piece of technology or whatever, we're doing it the right way. But I guess that the question I get a lot, at least lately, from different companies, technical companies and others is, what do we do to adapt to that rate of change? I did a show on it I think a couple weeks ago now, but what do those companies do to sort of alleviate the fear of that employee who says, hey, there's just so much going on, right? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I guess I'm a little. You asked two questions. What do you do with the company and what do you do with the employee? So, to me, it all starts with the end user. So you go to the companies, you go to the employees and say, what do you like and what don't you like and what do we need to change? I know at A to Z, a lot of the changes we make to our technology are driven by our clients that have said, what if you could do this? And we're like, that's a tremendous idea. And that makes sense for the masses, as opposed to making a change for a one-off dealer. So I don't know that there's enough done there. It's kind of like, I've heard people in the past say that dealers should hold 20 groups of clients, have meetings with clients and get them in a room and find out what are we doing well, more importantly, what are we not doing well? Well, the same could be said with technology providers and their clients.
Right.
Instead of making a square peg and saying, I don't care what your hole looks like, this is what we're making. Why don't you find out the shape of the hole and say, let's see if we can make it, and does everybody have that same shape, and let's make it to fit everybody. I don't think that's just done enough.
Yeah, there's a show, I think it's a Gordon Ramsay show about restaurants, and he goes into communities where there's failing restaurants, and he asks the community members, what do you think of this restaurant? Yeah. And I wonder what would happen if a dealer did that in their local community, Or the manufacturer said, hey, let's send our field reps out to local restaurants. Go, what do you think of ABC, whatever the brand is? And how can you fix it? I mean, I think that's a valid, or even if they went into the service department with people waiting, say, you know, how can we improve this? Right? Like, when's the last time the service manager or sales manager did that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they solicit this input, probably because they're afraid of what they're going to hear. And if they're afraid of what they're going to hear, then they immediately just determine or have concluded that the lift to make this change is way too much, and I'm making enough money now. I'm not doing it, which is too bad. You know, I mean, you know, you hear with sports teams, if the team stinks and the fans keep coming, and there's no incentive. I mean, I'm living it with the Colorado Rockies. I mean, they suck, but the fans keep coming because they got a great, you know, great stadium and great atmosphere. So there's no incentive.
Yeah, I mean,
when the fans, when the customers quit coming, that you're gonna finally that might finally move you.
Well, I used the example lately of that new Disney series where they don't understand the people who watch Star Wars episodes or Star Wars films, and they've taken it so far away from that fan base, and then they're upset or they're surprised that the fan base doesn't want to watch it. Well, first thing, you might want to understand that probably a large percentage of your fans are male, I would guess. I mean, I haven't done the homework, but it was just, to me, it was a total disconnect from a corporate culture to a you know, I just didn't understand it. I was like, wow.
I'm curious because I've almost purposely stayed out of this AI world. Because as soon as those two letters came out, everybody ran like a madman to, I'm going to adopt AI.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, are people adopting technology just so they can say they adopted technology, but they haven't really thought about how the use case and how that might be applicable in their particular, you know, company, let alone their particular industry? Because you certainly hear everybody and their brother talking about AI. But AI still doesn't address what we talked about earlier, which is just basic humanity and treating people right.
It's about what you're doing with it. It's not about the technology by itself. And I think that's part of the challenge. Is it's like, okay, first of all, what's the problem? What's the opportunity? What can we solve?
Right.
And then what's the best way to solve it? Not saying that AI couldn't be part of it in theory. It might be. But you know, the belief that we should bake it into everything like we're baking a cake might not be the answer. I don't know. I mean, that's what it seems to be what people are doing is they're making it.
This is your, I mean, tech is your world. Are there people blindly running towards those two letters without ever even having a plan?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing I like to think about is data as a value and data as power, right? And there are lots of folks who are, you know, basically using ChatGPT, using Claude, using some of these generative AI products, and they're losing more and more of their ability to think critically and think deep. And worse, they're dealing with systems that if they share data with them, they don't know where the data goes. So they're yielding power to these systems. And then secondly, or third, I guess, if we're keeping count, is you know, we've got an incredible opportunity here where I really do believe that folks are going to lose their ability to do their jobs, right? Which is not a story about AI replacing them. It is them becoming over reliant and interdependent on technology to do things for them, which, you know, is a story that is as old as you know, since the earth cooled. We've come up, we've built tools. We built tools and we built systems, and later on we got into digital technology that allowed us to do more every day, right?
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think let's keep it in the lane of retail automotive, is there's the double whammy that's happening with car dealers right now is that you've got a majority of vehicles which are connected to the internet in real time. And that's all going to the OEM. It's not going to the
Mhm.
dealer. In 99.9% of all cases, there are a few dealers out there, maybe on the franchise side, that are able to get in and get a little bit of that signal to come to them. But, you know, there will come this to the example that Ian was just giving in terms of understanding how a brand persists or it doesn't, and an audience is there or it's not. Is there's very little attention being paid in the customer relationship, right? And you have existential things you can't control right now that are guaranteeing you'll have less and less of the connective thread with your customer, right? So, that's not an existential statement, but it is for a whole lot of companies that aren't being very serious about how they invest in humanization, to borrow that from you, Doug. If they're investing in the human experience on one hand, and the modernization of their technology systems, their operational systems, right? If you don't understand that's a symphony that you have to invest in at the same time, and then in turn invest in it and lean into it and iterate, knowing that it's not a turnkey, give me a software license and I'll see you later kind of thing. It is, hey, how do we get into continuous optimization, continuous improvement? Almost in a Toyota Kaizen kind of way, right? Is just to always be looking at how we can do our jobs better. And what are our KPIs for that? And the KPIs that dealers don't have are our customer lifetime values growing? Are people coming in with recency and frequency? They're not looking at things like that, right? Are they referring business to us? Are we creating champions out of our customers that they go home to their neighborhoods and their neighbors start buying from us, right? Are we, if we're doing our job the right way here, that's the kind of behavior we're going to create and we're going to be able to reinforce to help grow revenues, to help the brand persevere.
What's interesting is like maybe one of the, in a strange way, the good byproduct of the CDK fiasco is the fact that a lot of people realized, wow, I can still do an awful lot without technology. And I know I've talked to many a dealer that said, listen, I was around 30, 40 years ago. We didn't have any of this stuff. And that's how we did deals. And it was great. And I think it was a good, probably for some deals, it was a good eye opener.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think you said it best, there's a symphony between technology and humanization. And when you get that symphony really humming, that's the type of music everybody can appreciate.
Yeah, you've got to have technology, but you also have to know what to do with it. And I think that's 100% correct. I was talking to a friend of mine. She has a young son. I guess he's 14. And they were going out in the car somewhere and he'd forgotten his phone. And he was more panicked about this phone sitting at home the entire time than anything else that was going on. And it was kind of funny because it's like, I think distraction has gotten to the point where it's impacting quality of life and what people do. And I think to your point, Doug, I mean, not having technology for a while might be a good thing for some people.
Well, and I'll end on this because I have to hop to another call. But I think some of the most enjoyable times I've had recently is when I've purposely left my cell phone at home and left and went to whatever I was going to, because then I'm totally present. And to a degree, dealers need to figure out how to be present with their customers and let technology be in the background and work more on being present. And I'll leave it at that.
Well, that was great final thought. Any final thoughts, Tim?
Same, the same is, turning off the notifications on your phone. You may not be able to leave it behind, but basically shut off the noise. and give yourselves more opportunity to look people in the eyes. Mix your fiction with nonfiction as well. Is the thing I like to say is, if you're watching one news channel all the time, you need to stop watching TV, or you need to watch some other channel half the time. So in order to yourself, for self perseverance and self preservation, you gotta keep your own education and your own experiential things in life. They've got to be mixed. They have to be rich. And that goes right in line with what you're saying about being present. Is you're not going to be able to absorb it unless you're present.
Fantastic. It's been a great show. Appreciate it. Have a great week. Bye for now.
Take care.
Dude.